we can jump onto there. Okay. So as I mentioned in the post, I had been struggling with hives myself for many years, and it was probably about 15 years and I see the same kind of paths that a lot of you are following. Is I was in the same place of not understanding, what are the triggers and why is this happening? Because it seemed like it was out of the blue, and I'd started food journaling and nothing made sense. It seemed like nothing was connected until I'd been to allergists, like a lot of you guys have as well, dermatologists, and been told that I was allergic to so many things. And so these were all things that are in my normal environment, things like pollen and grass and dust and animals. And so you think to yourself, like, how am I supposed to stay away from all of these things? You can't really lead a life. And so I tried the more natural route, and I started going to what we call here in Switzerland biomedicine doctors, and these are more naturopathic doctors, and they ran a bunch of tests as well, and they also told me that I was sensitive to different foods. Now, a lot of you guys have tested yourselves, I think, for food allergies, and this is one of the main things. I think a lot of people go down a certain road thinking that I'm allergic to a food, and then they get told by their allergist, either you're allergic to a lot of things and then you cut them out and it helps somewhat, but it doesn't help completely, or they're told that they're not allergic to any foods, and so they get really confused. And so I was told that I was sensitive, or that I was intolerant to gluten, dairy, and a number of other different foods, things like hazelnuts and mussels that I actually never eat. And so I thought to myself immediately when I got those results that I didn't believe them, because I was expecting, like a lot of people out there, that I would respond immediately when I ate something. So I would eat gluten and think, oh, okay, then I'm going to get a hive, or I'm going to feel a response, maybe, I don't know, some kind of allergic response, maybe a tightening in the throat or something else. And I never felt anything. I didn't even feel digestive issues. So I didn't believe it. And so I kept going with the gluten and dairy, trip, because it's in a lot of our diets. And only when I really gave it a chance and said, okay, look, I'm going to cut out all of these things that they said I'm sensitive to, and really went on it for a couple of months, did I start to notice results. And I think a lot of you have tried and have read a lot about chronic urticaria and have realized that it has a lot to do with the histamine response. And this is what I really wanted to explain to you guys in today's class, is that a low histamine diet is great for relieving things in the short term, because it really is. I talk about the histamine bucket, and I'll explain it again to you guys. It really helps to lower this, or reduce the amount of histamine that is being produced in our bodies, or at least this bucket filling up. So when we are thinking about a response that our bodies are giving in terms of hives, we understand that it is a response of histamine, which is our mast cells degranulating and causing this release of histamine, and causing issues like hives on our skin, or anything else like anaphylactic shock, or things that for instance, Natasha was describing earlier. But when we understand what starts to fill up this bucket, this is when we can begin to make choices that make sure that we're not filling the bucket too fast, and we are helping our bucket to clear. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the histamine bucket very quickly here. So there are a number of things that will cause our immune system to start reacting. And as we've seen in the last 2 years, things like viruses and bacteria are one of the things that our immune system will naturally respond to and cause an immune response to. But there are a bunch of other things that are in our environment all the time that our immune system is always surveilling and responding to, or choosing to respond to, or not choosing to respond to. And the problem is when we are in an environment where we have too much of all of these things that our immune system could respond to, it starts to become a little bit overwhelmed. And this is generally what's happening in something like chronic urticaria. It has been developing over a period of time. So it's never just one thing. And that's why a lot of the people that have been suffering with chronic urticaria might be slightly older, middle-aged, especially women, because we have a lot more hormonal issues to deal with as well. But they start to build up over time. And this is when our histamine bucket just starts to get to a point where it overflows. So our immune system responds to 3 types of things. And I'll break it down very easily for you, because it's when you're looking out for these 3 things in your environment, then it's a little bit easier to say, okay, I'm able to stay away from this and this, and slowly start removing these things from your environment. So one of the main things that we understand makes urticaria even worse is stress. Okay, and Scott's spoken about it in his interview with me as well, and on his YouTube videos. That was one of the major things. And I think a lot of people who struggle with urticaria also realize that stress exacerbates the hives. Now, stress is going to cause a number of different biochemical reactions in our body, and this is why we need to be aware of how we're responding to stress. And we need to have a number of different stress management techniques that we can fall back on to help our bodies manage stress a lot better. So the main biochemical response that happens when we are stressed is an increase in blood sugar. And when we're increasing blood sugar, obviously there's a lot more happening with our liver needing to clear or store glucose. And so that's one of the first things that one of our main detoxification organs, our liver, starts to become more burdened or a little bit more taxed when dealing with stress. Okay. So also when we have stress response, there are a lot more hormone things going on. Cortisol goes up, our thyroid hormone starts to also get taxed, as well as our sex hormones also starting to go out of whack, because the moment our body and our adrenals are prioritizing the stress hormones like cortisol, then they're not prioritizing other hormones such as our sex hormones, for instance. And this is why in later age for women, when we move in towards more menopausal stages, our sex hormone production is no longer being taking place in our ovaries. It gets switched to our adrenals. And this is why stress for middle-aged women or women who are more menopausal or postmenopausal becomes so important, because your stress hormones then take over the production, or the stress hormones get prioritized instead of all of your sex hormones. Okay, so that's one of the factors that really affect we as women, hormonal issues. All right, so stress is the one factor. Then one thing that's always happening every single day in our bodies is food. So we're always feeding food into our faces. And this is where we really need to get focused on what's coming in and how are we processing it. So a lot of people are focusing on a low histamine diet, but they're not understanding that the toxins that come with food that we're putting into our mouth, whether it be pesticides or things like glyphosate, these BPA, even in foods and drinks that we're having. So whether you're having lots of canned foods or bottled water, these are toxins that are all coming with things that we're putting into our mouth. So that's one of the factors that we're thinking of when we're looking at food. It's not only the quality of the food, but it's also the kind of wholesomeness, obviously, of the nutrition that we're putting in. So we're really need to be focusing on foods that are low inflammatory rather than necessarily low histamine. Okay, so histamine and low histamine foods are going to help keep your bucket lower, but it's not a long-term solution. So I see a lot of people are focusing on a low histamine diet, but if you've seen the lists, and I've looked at the lists and I just like glaze over, they're just so overwhelmingly complicated that it's very difficult to follow a low histamine diet over a longer period of time. And so when you're focusing more on the quality of your food, and the fact that food should be low inflammatory, i.e. not causing inflammation in your gut or in your mucosal lining, then you're able to start rebuilding your gut lining as well. So that's when we come to the second part, which is a little bit more into gut health. But so I was talking about the three things. So stress being the one, food being the other. And when I talk about food as well, I talk about the three differences in food allergies, food intolerances, and food sensitivities. So this is a key area where we go wrong. Is the food allergies, you'll know that you're allergic to a food. Okay, so you'll eat it and you'll have an immediate response. A food intolerance is where you lack an enzyme to break down certain things. So we might be told that we're histamine intolerant, and we imagine that we don't have the enzymes to break down histamine. And that is partially true if you have a genetic predisposition to not producing enough DAO, which is the enzyme to break down histamine. But it's largely a case of an imbalance of overproduction of histamine or over intake of histamine, as well as an under ability to remove histamine. And that ability to remove histamine is really based in our guts. So we produce this DAO enzyme in our guts, and when we have inflamed guts, and that's why all of your other predisposing factors and any other symptoms that you might be experiencing, I'm guessing, Natasha and Jana, that you might have possibly gut symptoms. Maybe you have bloating or gas or burping, anything that might be giving you an indication that your digestive system's not working optimally, then we know that your production of DAO is going to be much lower than a healthier person. So a healthy gut will be producing enough enzyme to break down histamine and clear it. Okay, so that's
Can
one.
I interject for just a moment? I've been taking the DAO supplement, the enzyme, and I felt that help. But I believe part of the reason that my DAO production was compromised is I was taking Advil or ibuprofen, the non-branded term, for quite a while due to back injury or back pain from working at home, sitting in a chair that wasn't ideal for me. So something that I never would have clued in to connect the dots to think maybe this Advil is actually part of the reason, because again, like you say, I wasn't getting an allergic reaction. But Advil or ibuprofen is known to be interfere with the production of DAO. So I am taking a supplement now, but just in case anybody else is a regular anti-inflammatory medication consumer. I know my sister and my mother have also had issues like this. So just mentioning it because I didn't realize it directly affected my own body's ability to produce DAO.
It's a really great point, Jana, because there are two medications, at least that I know of, that people are taking without understanding the impact it has on our systems. And anti-inflammatories are one of them. So a lot of people, because they're over the counter, think that they're pretty harmless. But even after a couple of days of taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, your gut lining becomes compromised. And so that's exactly the reason why your DAO production will become compromised as well. It's because you're interfering with your gut, a healthy gut lining, and no longer able to produce as well the DAO. Okay, so that it's a great connection. And the other medication that a lot of females are taking is birth control pills. Those also interfere with our guts. And so and I talk about the timeline, I did a class on the timeline, understanding your path and the kind of things that you've been doing in your life, in the history. You might even be able to say, okay, your hives started soon after an extensive phase of using anti-inflammatories. That's just for instance. Or after a particular stressful event, or, you know, so if you look back on your timeline, you might be able to find clues as to what's going to start helping you reverse this process. And very often it has something to do with these three things: a stressful event, exposure to toxins, either through your food or through something else, whether it was a work environment, or a virus, or an infection, for instance, or perhaps even changing the way you ate. So I've spoken to a couple of people who went vegan, and for instance, even veganism may not be necessarily the best option for a couple of people, because it might lean them more towards a more gluten-rich diet, for instance. That's just as an example. But diet changes could also be something that could affect it. But thanks for pointing that out, Jana. So yeah, so the 3 points that I made was the stress, the toxins, and the food. These are 3 areas that you need to be constantly surveilling in your environment. So I have another client that we'd been working for a while together, and we'd been focusing on diet, and she'd really cleaned up her diet magnificently, and things were starting to improve. But then she had another flare, and we couldn't understand where it was. And then she went back to her timeline, and she figured out that actually there was an injection that she was taking for migraines that had Botox in it. And Botox itself is a toxic bacteria that is beneficial for some things, or at least useful in certain areas, but might become a burden to your body if it's dealing with other things already. So it's another thing that we just add a big burden onto our buckets. And that's why I wrote that post I did yesterday describing how I could follow my timeline of my last, angioedema flare. I could trace it back to a number of different things that were just filling my bucket very, very quickly. Okay, so this histamine bucket will start to fill up if you're filling it up with things you're putting on your skin, which could be toxins. So be very careful, ladies, of what products you're using on your skin, whether they contain pigs or parabens, or just something called fragrance, which is also some kind of hormone disruptor. Whether it's in your food through BPA, as I've mentioned, pesticides, in your water, maybe some, unfiltered water, slight bits of toxins, as well as, in your air. How clean is your home environment? Perhaps you're being exposed to mold unknowingly. So one of the other admins, Jo, is a colleague of mine, and she also experienced hives, and her main thing that caused her filling of the bucket was exposure to mold. She was working in a school that had mold everywhere, and that was one of the main things. But also that kept her there was a stress response, and so her brother had passed away, and she was holding in a lot of emotions. So that becomes another factor. So they all start to add up. I don't know if any of you are starting to make connections through what I've been saying, but if you start to see that it's not necessarily only one thing, but a layering of several things over a period of time, and a taxing of your immune system as well as your detoxification system. So that clearance is now compromised, and so this building up just starts to overflow your bucket, and that's when we're having all of these symptoms. So we can chat a little bit about the early symptoms that maybe some of you have been experiencing or had been experiencing, because 2 of you have had hives for a very long time. Janelle, I don't know your particular story, but at least maybe you want to jump in and tell us a little bit about how long you've been having hives, as well as any connections you've made more recently. Do you want to jump on, Janelle?
Yeah, I've only recently had the hives from probably about April this year. it started. And mine, I would most definitely say, is stress related. I can definitely pin it down to that for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so it's only been the last couple of months. So the stress trigger, is this something that you're able to manage, or how do you feel that you're dealing with the stress trigger?
Well, it was a majority due to my work. So I actually left my work.
Okay.
And so I kind of retired early.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 57. Oh yeah, 57. So I didn't really plan on retiring yet. So then it's kind of, stretching me a little bit financially, which is stressful. But yeah, I just couldn't be at work any longer. It had a few other things happening, with work related as well. Because I'd ended up with a hernia from work in October last year, and that claim was denied. And so I've been asking for reviews of that claim, and I've gone to the tribunal with it now. And I've only just recently, they sent me to another specialist, and he's absolutely agreeing that it is work related. So I've kind of been, that was the icing on the cake for me, like the tip of it, because I'd had so much other stuff going on, and then had that claim denied, which I couldn't believe. Nobody could believe it really. And then I asked for a review. It still didn't get changed. And that, when I got the decision of that review that I asked for, that was April.
Mm-hmm.
And that really upset me, because that's what I was like, how am I supposed to go to work and put my all into it?
Yeah.
There'd been other things going on beforehand with unfairness and things like that with work, but that did it for me. And I thought, I just can't be here. Like, I was sort of shaking internally sitting at my desk. I was just like a nervous wreck. So I gave up work.
Yeah, it's a great decision that you came to. I think a lot of us feel that we have to be stuck in a certain position, and but I think our circumstances and very oftentimes our bodies give us the signs that we need to change something in our lives. And so I'm glad that you took that as a sign to start changing something. I'm interested though, because I often find that, like even for my colleague Joe, the stress was the trigger that kept things going. But was there anything beforehand or any symptoms previously that might lead you to believe that your immune system wasn't functioning optimally, or even your digestive system?
Well, I do see a naturopath every now and then, and I have been to workshops on gut health, so I do believe that is a factor as well. Yeah, so I would say that, but just around, sorry, when the hives kicked off, like I had a different type of hair color done at a different hairdresser, and I really severely kind of reacted to that. Like my skull was kind of throbbing afterwards. So I actually thought it was an allergic reaction to that to start with, but my immunologist says no, it's not allergy related. They say it's like autoimmune.
It's the perfect example of a toxin coming into our bodies, whether it be a chemical like through a hair dye or whatever it might be, or like my recent flare, the C jab. These are all things that our body's not used to seeing, and so will cause an immune response. So it's clear that there was already a relatively overwhelmed immune system, and
I
your
would agree with
response
that.
was excessive then.
Yeah, for sure.
So going back to the others, Natasha, for instance, you were nodding quite extensively when I said you probably have a couple of other issues going on, or had a couple of other issues going on before developing hives. Now, a lot of people, have comorbidities like we mentioned, like I had was asthma as well as eczema. So very often all of these other skin conditions, as well as what we call atopic issues, are linked, as well as thyroid issues. So it's very, very common that people with urticaria also have either a hypothyroidism, or they even have a diagnosis of Hashimoto's. I'm curious to know, Natasha, on your side, is there any previous diagnosis of something else?
Yeah, I was nodding because after watching some of the videos that you had posted on the page, I sort of started going back and looking at, all right, well, if I go back to a really young age, what can I identify that may sort of fall into these categories that we're discussing? Because generally, until I moved out of home as a late teen, we were extremely healthy people. Like our family, we didn't really have, we were pretty basic in terms of what we ate. We didn't really have exposure to sort of red and green colorings and MSG, and that was primarily because I was quite a bad asthmatic and had eczema myself. So as I got older and a teenager and had control of that myself, I started introducing these things quite rapidly. And then at 21, got chicken pox. And when I got the chicken pox and started stressing about money, like Janelle was just saying, as, you know, I guess when I say stressing, just learning to manage it myself as someone living out of home, that's when everything started. So then I go, all right, it wasn't as bad as it is now, but I can see that just recently my last flare was in conjunction with the COVID jab. And funny enough, I've got a great job, but I got offered another job and I was at a crossroads and stressing significantly about whether that's something I should do, and it just triggered a flare. So yeah, I'm definitely feeling that that when I look at some of these areas, that my gut health, I believe, has been compromised over the years as a child by having asthmatic medication and topical steroids from the eczema. And then, I obviously, have even made it worse by introducing things that it wasn't used to, and a combination of things have just set it, on a path into what's happening now. So, yeah, but I also do get gastrointestinal symptoms, migraines, brain fog. So that mast cell activation syndrome that Jana was talking about, I've been trying to understand that a little bit better. And I definitely noticed that, my flares are very cyclic as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of different areas that come up in these conversations and posts that I'm feeling very familiar with in my case.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of things that already say that even before you moved out of home, that you already had an immune system that was struggling with your environment, whether it be the food that you're eating. And most commonly, I see those that struggle with eczema, like I did, and asthma. It's a sensitivity to foods. And so that food sensitivity is one of the key areas that I like to draw attention to people, because it is so difficult to diagnose as such, because you're not having an immediate response. So with food sensitivities, it's always a delayed response, and that's anything between 3 hours and 72 hours. So it could be up to 3 days before you start responding in some way, and you might even not be responding in a way that a lot of people find obvious. So it could be something that you've just shrugged off as, this is my normal. It could be something as simple as, oh, my bowels are a little bit slower today, kind of story, and not necessarily like excruciating migraine or whatever it might be. But and this is how I notice in my own body. And I think I would love you guys to get to this point where you start looking and listening to responses in your body. So my eczema was one of the key areas that also cleared up after I changed my diet. And so every time I go off the track and start introducing more of my food sensitivities, I notice small patches of eczema come. And that's one of my first signs that maybe I'm veering a little bit too far off, the path that I should be on. So it's my warning sign. And so if I ignore that and I keep going, then I might experience something a little bit worse, whether it be bigger patches of eczema or constipation or whatever it might be. So for each of you, it will be different. We're not all responding in the same way. And that's why it's important also, our food system sensitivities are usually also very different. And if you've been struggling for a long time, it's very likely that you've become sensitive to the very foods you're eating every single day, even if they're healthy. So what happens is when you've been eating something that causes leaky gut, and we've heard the terminology leaky gut, this exposes you to a lot of undigested food proteins. So these undigested food proteins pass through this very thin, one cell thick barrier of our intestinal lining, and our immune system sits on the other side and says, whoa, these things shouldn't be here. Let me start creating antibodies to them. And so the more antibodies we produce, the more responsive we become to a certain food. And over a long period of time, when our immune system's seeing these pass through all the time, it becomes hyper responsive. And then if you don't deal with it, further down the line, you can develop an autoimmune disease, whether it be Hashimoto's, which is one of the more common ones, or rheumatoid arthritis, or any of the other autoimmune diseases. There are more than 100 different autoimmune diseases now. But that's why we need to make sure that our gut lining is normal permeability. It has normal permeability. It should be allowing nutrients through, but it should not be allowing all undigested food proteins as well as bacteria or anything else on the other side coming through. Okay, and this is where gut health becomes a very key part of your healing journey as well. So you can reverse your hives just by diet change alone, by removing your food sensitivities, by ensuring that you're getting a lot more nutrients into your diet. But it may not necessarily keep you safe over the long term if you've developed food sensitivities to even the healthy foods. Okay, so we need to start making sure that you rebuild your gut lining. So part of the functional medicine approach is the 5R approach. I speak about it in my other masterclass. And that 5R is remove. So remove everything that your body might not be tolerating. Remove anything that might be causing a burden on your system. So like the toxins, the stress, as well as food issues. And then replacing as many nutrients as possible. So eating a nutrient-dense diet, as well as making sure that you're bringing on these nutrients. So it's no good that we're eating a nutrient-dense diet, but we can't bring on these nutrients. So a lot of the issues that I see is that people, despite eating a really healthy diet, so a lot of the people that come to me have already made diet changes, but when I look at their blood chemistry, I can see that there's still a lot of nutrient deficiencies, and that's because they're unable to digest the nutrients that are coming in, or assimilate and absorb them. So that's where the gut health part becomes really key, and ensuring that you're replacing digestive juices, whether it be stomach acid or digestive enzymes, any of these things that are helping you assimilate the food that you're eating, and making sure that they're getting into your body. Okay. So that's the other key part is gut health. Then the other thing that I mentioned is the detoxification area. So a lot of the people that are struggling with urticaria have obviously all of these toxins or food sensitivities or stresses that are burdening their bodies, and their liver is under an immense amount of pressure to help clear all of this. And so I see on blood chemistry that the liver is struggling, whether it be because of a poor diet as well, maybe poor blood sugar control, maybe too much alcohol, just typical lifestyle issues that are putting a burden on the liver. And so we do need to start helping your liver relieve that burden. And that's why the 5 R's, removing and replacing, are one of the 2 keys that are going to help your liver start clearing toxins naturally. Okay. And then the other part of the 5R is repairing any damage to the gut lining, as well as re-inoculating with probiotics. So one of the mistakes that a lot of people do is they take probiotics without dealing with what's causing all of this mess in the gut in the first place. So it's helpful to an extent, but it's not a long-term solution because you haven't dealt with the root cause of why there's an imbalance in your gut. And so that's why the 5R is a very structured process of how to approach rebuilding your gut and rebuilding your health. So I want to welcome Dan. You joined just recently. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey with chronic urticaria? Dan, can you hear us? Okay. Listening but not listening. All right. Does anybody else have some questions with regards
Hi
to
there.
yeah.
This is Jan again. I actually didn't realize that some probiotics contribute to the body's own production of histamine.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain strains, and I checked. I was taking a probiotic that actually had a strain within it that would actually help my body to produce more histamine. And I've since changed to the same probiotic that Scott recommended or that he was taking in his video. I'm not sure that the brand is particularly important, so I won't call that out here, but I think I have seen benefits from taking that. And again, it's cumulative, right? So I was following quite a few different protocols, not just adding on probiotics, but reducing some of the foods and the stressors. And you know what, for me, I think a lot of it was preservatives and additives. I think I first had my flare as a young teenager after going on a very long diet to lose weight. And a lot of diet foods have preservatives, right? They're prepackaged or they're flavored to be palatable. So just something to keep in mind. If, for me, I notice when I get stressed out or busy, I tend to switch more to convenience foods. And maybe some of those have the health halo of being so-called healthy foods. But I've been feeling so much better since I've switched to more whole unprocessed foods. And I know that's no surprise, it's a cliche, but it's something else to experience it for myself. So I'm just really grateful that I came across Scott's video and that I've experienced now that I've been following that for a few months.
Yeah. How long have you been on the low histamine diet then, Jana?
I started at the end of October, and at that point I was taking the double dose of an antihistamine prescription called Bilastine or Blexten. Mm-hmm. It's available in Canada. I'm not sure what other countries. And that was not controlling the angioedema. I was getting swelling in my palms, my feet, my face. And so it took a few weeks to really see a difference, but I've been following it since then. Over the Christmas holidays, I definitely relaxed some of my approach, and I kind of saw the flare up from that. But I've been able to reduce the antihistamine prescription to either one a day or even every other day. Like I'm at the point now where I'm trying to get through the day without taking it, and then only taking it if I really feel like the flare is worthy. And the reason for that is the antihistamine, it covers the symptoms, but like you said, it doesn't address the root cause. So I don't really want to be taking that indefinitely when there's things going on that need to be addressed. So I'm not antihistamine. I'm not anti-intervention. I think sometimes we need to do whatever it takes just to get through a really uncomfortable period. But I think for me, I'm really motivated to investigate the root causes because I don't want to take an antihistamine indefinitely. That's just going to mask symptoms and problems. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I even explain to my clients why I don't jump to supplements, because I'd love to know, and I'd love for you to know, what your body's able to do on its own without supplements. And especially when people are, and I think a lot of people started there maybe, is taking antihistamines or even a supplement, so something natural that helped and relieved the symptoms, and then they didn't look at the root cause. And so they stopped looking for any reasons as to why they developed issues in the first place. And so I believe that our symptoms are actually our gift to go and start looking at why and looking for the root cause, because only when we find the root cause are we able to manage things long term. So I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of taking supplements long term unless I fully understand that there's a major gap in my life or in my diet, whether it be something like omega-3s because I don't eat that much fish, or whether it be vitamin D during winter because I can't get any sun. So these are the kinds of reasons that I might be taking a supplement, but not because I'm just trying to cover up something that I could otherwise address through diet. So food first for me in general.
That's a great advice. That with the the probiotic, I should say, I really took that to address what I believed was the problem from taking Advil or ibuprofen in the long term, because I'd been taking it intermittently for over a year. I thought this ibuprofen is probably damaged my gut lining to the point where taking a course of probiotics would be helpful. But I agree. And even with a low histamine diet, from what I understand, the intent is not to follow it forever and ever. It's to kind of buy you some time to give your body a chance to rebalance. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Which is great. And so it is a great intervention for a lot of people to find fairly quick relief, as well as the supplements. But if you don't get at why you had the issues in the first place, you're not going to resolve them over the long term. And I think, as I've said before, the low histamine diet is very difficult to stick to over the longer term. So my question to you, Jana, though, is what was the reason that you had to take so many Advils or painkillers? What was the issue there?
Yeah. Well, it's funny how these things have a domino effect. I was working from home because of the pandemic. I've been working from home now for almost 2 years, and didn't really think about the ergonomic situation. I was sitting in a chair that didn't have proper back support. I pinched a nerve just through everyday movement, and the stress, of course, didn't help. And the gyms and all of the fitness things that I used to do were closed or canceled or shut down because of the pandemic. So it was like a whole domino effect where these things that I'd been doing to take care of my body and my fitness, I'd stopped doing for various reasons. They were either no longer available, the business had gone out of business, whatever. Took this Advil to help manage the pain. And, I was working with a physiotherapist just trying to get my functional movement back. But I didn't realize how cumulative the damage from Advil could be. Or, I was also experiencing acid reflux, which is also associated with mast cell activation, and also, stomach issues. So again, it's one of these over-the-counter drugs here in Canada and in many countries, where it's treated almost like a joke. Like my sister actually calls it vitamin A, and like she laughs about it, but Advil, vitamin A. But I haven't taken it since October. I don't really want to test that out unless I absolutely have to. And right now here in Canada, we have more lockdowns related to COVID. So going to the hospital, having any sort of really serious health crisis is not something I want to provoke, just based on our healthcare system at the moment.
Yeah. You said earlier, though, that your hives started in 94. So is this when you were saying that you started taking Advil?
No. So I believe the first trigger for me was probably like later puberty. So that would have related to increased hormone levels, combined with being on that long-term diet where I would have been eating a lot of processed foods. As a younger child as well, I had a series of really bad ear infections. I was put on quite a few antibiotics as a really young child. I believe that, like, in retrospect, that probably caused my gut microbiome to be off from a very young age. It could have resulted in my having an issue with my weight in the first place, where I felt I had to lose weight. So these are all related, and they're not simple solutions, and it does take a lot of patience. But I think it's worth investigating, because the other option would just be to pile on pharmaceuticals and supplements, which I don't really feel like that's a good solution for me. And again, I really want to be clear, like, I'm not anti prescription, or like, if my husband has a number of autoimmune issues and he takes drugs for that, and he's gone through cancer, so I'm not against that. I want to minimize the bucket. So how do we empty that bucket as what is within our control to empty that bucket? That's my philosophy. And then there's going to be some things that I just don't have control over. I don't necessarily have control over how stressed out I feel from the pandemic, or just over like, we all have things beyond our control. So I'm very interested in understanding sort of what goes into that bucket, and how much do I have control over that.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So, I mean, it's great that you have this totally investigative mind, because that's what it requires. It requires a mindset that says, I'm not going to settle with just taking, an easy cover up. I'm going to start looking and addressing my life and what my body's telling me. So, yeah, well done to you. So before I summarize, I just wanted to see if Diane, do you want to say anything? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey? Is he still not listening? Probably not. Okay, so I'm just going to summarize.
It's Janelle. Could I just say something? So the level of medication I'm now, I have to take the Xolair injections, 300 milligrams per month. That's what I started on in July. Because the antihistamines, I was taking like quadruple of the H1s, and I was given the H2s as well, and they just weren't doing anything for me. So then I had to take prednisone steroids. That worked for me, and obviously you can't stay on those for very long because they're bad for other reasons. So I'm on Xolair injections. So I don't know how that compares with like Gianna and Natasha, what level of medication. It sounds like Gianna's just the antihistamine. So I don't know how much of an impact, or how much harder is it to, work on the gut health and that, because I'm actually still having breakthroughs with the hives even while I'm on that injections. I go in February for another checkup with him, so I'm not sure what's going to happen out of that.
Well, my guess, Janelle, is that the work thing was just like the cherry on top. So your bucket was already full, and that was just a trigger to push it all over, to overflow. So there's probably a lot of groundwork that you can do to just start emptying that bucket. And that's why I talk about the foundational principles of nutrition. So I don't know how your diet looks right now. I don't know how your environment looks in terms of toxins, whether it's in your food, on your skin, in your air, etc. I don't know what kind of gut health you have. So it all depends, all of these different factors are going to determine how fast you can empty this bucket. Okay.
Yeah, when I've last been to the naturopath, which would probably in November or whatever, he said like it's like my energy level is 0, like my battery's dead. I need to get more nutrition in. He said it was like I needed to take some salt to get the battery started up again. And the nutrition, and I think, he gave me some things to have, which I think he mentioned one. I can't think what that's for, but nutrition I'm sure is a big factor, but I have trouble trying to work out what I should eat, what I should and shouldn't. And he did a food intolerance test with me, and I showed a high intolerance to eggs and cow's milk. So, I mean, I used to like, you know, scrambled eggs or things like that. So now I'm not trying to have those sort of things, but yeah, I find it difficult to work out what I should eat.
Yeah, what you should eat. Well, this is kind of the stuff that I cover in my reboot or my nutrition program. So this is a very focused 5-week period where we take out all of the things that might be causing inflammation in our bodies, whether it be gluten and dairy or a list of other different foods, as well as introducing a whole bunch of nutrient-dense foods. So you would get a whole bunch of recipes as well as a food list. It's a very quick way of jumping on the bandwagon and making sure that we empty your bucket as fast as possible. Because what we do then as well is we incorporate a couple of detoxification practices that are going to help to support your liver, as well as start clearing any excess toxins that it might be dealing with, anything that might be burdening your liver. So we're doing that at the same time. So we're really bumping up the nutrition in your diet, as well as removing as many things as possible that could be burdening your liver, as well as filling your bucket, as well as then being able to have these kinds of conversations on a weekly basis to make sure that you're on track and that you're starting to feel better. Because nutrition changes on your own, I know a lot of you are managing it on your own, but it's difficult when you don't have the sounding board of like, am I on the right track? Or you know, what about this or what about that? So having that kind of sounding board is what I offer in my nutrition programs. And so I'm opening it up towards the end of January for my clients, and there will be a couple of spaces for the public to join. Like I mentioned right at the beginning of this talk, is that I prefer small groups, so that we have this one-on-one, that we can answer all these questions, because you can see it, the larger the group gets, the shorter the amount of time that you actually have to address your particular issues. But we all learn from everybody else's questions, and that's the beauty of a group, as well as we get inspired by the changes that everybody else is making, and we believe that it's possible for us too. So if you're the kind of person that needs this kind of group to help motivate you and get you on the bandwagon and start making the changes, then my group program would be the right thing for you.
So I've kind of just come across you on the group, Facebook support group. So how would I find out the information about your nutrition?
I haven't publicized the details, but if you give me your email address or you post it in the chat, then I'll make sure that you get some details on that once it's ready.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No problem, Janelle. Natasha, before you go to bed, you had your hand up.
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to ask what Janelle just did actually, in terms of, you know, the nutritional sort of guideline, I guess, or that you offer, and how to access that. And I also, you know, what Janelle was saying, you know, rings true with me, in that I've over the years tried generally the same type of elimination diet to try and get a better understanding of what I should and shouldn't be eating. And it's just, I just find it so difficult. I just don't, like, I do see improvement. I definitely think there is some changes there, but it never completely resolves my problems. And then I'll get a little bit better, I'll follow it, and then I'll start to you know, cheat every now and then all of a sudden 6 months later I go, oh, I've got to do it again, because I've let myself go. But then when you're looking at those 3 key areas, it makes me think, well, maybe that's, you know, 70% of my problem is in the sensitivity diet space, but the other things that I'm not addressing are the repairing of the gut with the proper nutrition, and stress is definitely something that, you know, is a cause for mine, 100%. So yeah, just finding ways to better improve those areas, I think is key for me anyway. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a key about what I try to do with my clients, is making sure that you're at a point where you feel confident of knowing that exactly these choices are going to be helping your body and these are not, as well as then being very sure about the signs that you're seeing from your body. So being more tuned in to the signals you're getting in your body, so that before it gets to the point that you have a hive breakout, you're already understanding that maybe you've veered a little bit too far off course. And I think for a lot of people, the big question is like, how long is this going to take, and how long do I have to be on the diet changes for? And unfortunately, there isn't a simple answer for everybody out there. It takes as long as your body takes, unfortunately, to find balance. And so my key area of expertise is making you understand what our cells need to be healthy cells. And so that they're, I think it was Janelle saying that your battery is completely flat. It's the mitochondria in your cells that are not able to produce energy anymore. So we're going to get you to a point where the mitochondria and your cells are at a point of functioning optimally. So you're going to be feeding it everything that your body needs, and making sure that your cells are healthy and giving you a lot of energy. And it is, I wouldn't say that it's an easy walk in the park. The nutrition changes are never that easy, which is why we got to the place that we were at. The lifestyles that we've been guided into by social norms, etc., are exactly what's landed us here. So it takes some change, but once you're on that train, and you're not alone in making these changes, and you'll be a lot more aware of everybody else that are making these changes, that it's a lot easier to make those decisions for yourself in the future. So I want to empower you to get to the point where it's an easy choice and it's an easy habit now in your lifestyle. So the 5 weeks is going to be, it's 1 week of slow change, 2 weeks of hard change, and then another 2 weeks of like guiding you back into a more normalized lifestyle. Okay. And everybody that's done the program before sees either a rapid increase in energy, or they see a drop in weight, or they see a resolution in hives, or at least an improvement for sure in their hives. Or they see many other different benefits, definitely in their skin, in their bowel movements. So there are quite a number of factors that you'll be able to actually see from a starting point and the end point of the kind of changes that you see in a space of 5 weeks. And the point out of the program is that you have the knowledge, you have the power, and you have the freedom to choose after that. Okay. So if you are interested in finding a little bit more about the program, put your email in the chat below and I'll send it to you once it's ready. If you already feel strong in diet changes and that you feel like you know what diet changes you make, the second step is the gut healing. And so that would be the follow-on program that I take clients through. And it's the same process that Mary went on. So if you follow or watch my interview with Mary started in the Reboot program, or this nutrition program, and then she went into the gut healing program, and then she did that. And after those few months of changes, you hear it in her interview. She's just like, yeah. So it speaks for itself. And I think that is a very logical process that I take all my private clients through. And I think there's a benefit of being in a group, being motivated by the group activity and the group dynamics. And so I'm here for you. It is going to be a 2 p.m. time on either a Monday or a Thursday. And if you can't make the live calls, you can post your questions ahead of time, as well as watch the recording. So everything will be recorded. And the bonus is that you will get to access these group programs for a full year after that. So for an entire year, if you feel like you didn't get everything you wanted out of it, or you wanted to refresh it in the next program, you get to join free of charge. Okay. Anybody's hand still up? Natasha, your hand's still up? Any more questions?
Yeah, sorry, I did have one more question which I wanted to ask you. So I'm the whole concept of a functional medicine practitioner is quite new to me. I hadn't really heard of it until now, through, you know, seeing Scott's video to finding you and joining this page. And so I've been trying to understand it a little bit better and researching practitioners in Australia. And I noticed that a lot of them tend to say on their website, I haven't personally engaged with anyone at this point, that there's a whole range of tests that get performed usually after a first consult, including a whole range of different things. So generally, in your approach, do you do these testings as well? And if do you do them for people that aren't in Switzerland? Like, can you access, or can we sort of engage with you and then find someone locally to perform those tests? Does that make sense?
So yeah, you're absolutely right. So a lot of the functional medicine practitioners have quite a strong emphasis on the testing part, and there's some really good functional medicine tests out there that can tell us a lot of information. So I'm a data person and a very logical minded person, and I love to see data and use data. But what I've found, and this is why the group programs are great, is you can do a lot without testing. Because the tests are not cheap, okay? It is something I do with my one-on-one clients, and they pay a lot higher price, and either 1 or 3 tests are included depending on what kind of level they're investing in. But it depends on what's going on for you as to what kind of test I recommend. So usually I would lean towards either a food sensitivity test or a gut test. More recently, the food sensitivity tests, because I find that a lot of people, even though they remove a lot of foods, they feel like there might still be something, or it's just they're not that in tune with their bodies. So having a food sensitivity test just gives them a little bit more certainty about what to keep out. So that's one of the reasons. But yes, globally, I have a lab that can send tests all over the place. So I have clients in Mexico, in Canada, and just America, Singapore. And so we can send tests pretty much everywhere. It might take longer for some destinations, but a lot of the functional tests are like at-home kits that you can do at home, and then send it off. One of the tests that I do recommend that you do locally is a blood chemistry, because it's a blood draw, and that generally needs to be done fairly fresh. Whether it arrives on time to be read well from Australia to the lab is in the Netherlands, it might be a little bit too dodgy. So I generally recommend blood chemistry to be done locally. But yes, for my private clients I do that, but for the group programs you don't actually need any of that to make progress. Okay,
great. Yeah. Thank you.
Good question. All right, so any other questions? I just wanted to give you just like a summary so that you guys have it clear in your heads about the kind of process that you go through. So those functional foundations that I talk about in my other class is it's nutrition is a very key part. So what kind of diet that you're eating, and that's what I deal with in the nutrition program. But also the other part is like, how well are you bringing on your nutrition? And that's the digestion and assimilation part. And that's what we deal with in the second phase, and that's the gut health. But then there are other aspects that you also need to be thinking about in the background, and that's always the stress. It's the movement, like Janelle was saying. I think Janelle or Janet was saying that they just didn't get enough movement. So that's the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about. And it's things like hydration, something that everybody talks about, but nobody does enough of. Those are key areas that you need to be focusing on. And so in the nutrition, getting clear on what to be removing. This we do in the program. Gluten and dairy definitely impact your gut. So that's like bottom line, you have to be removing gluten and dairy to support your gut lining. And then, yes, taking out some high histamine foods. And a lot of these things are quite obvious. It's whether it's alcohol or dairy or certain kinds of vegetables or fruits. Those things we would take out. And anything else that it may be heavily burdened with toxins, whether it's GMO stuff or pesticide-laden stuff. So corn and soy and that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. So that's the focus in the nutrition area, as well as supporting the liver with things that are with liver supporting foods, liver supporting drinks. Those are the kinds of things that we deal with in the program, and that's where you need to be researching, if you want to do it on your own, is what kinds of things are going to be supporting my liver, and what kind of things can I be eating on a regular basis that are anti-inflammatory. Okay, good. Well, thank you guys for showing up. For those of you who want to go, feel free to go, and I'll answer Janelle's question because I see she has her hand up.
Oh, I was just going to ask Natasha, because I'm in Australia as well, just where Natasha is in Australia.
I'm in Brisbane.
Oh, okay. I'm down near Sydney in Wollongong.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just thought if you're nearby, you know, you can get together and chat about this stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, community always helps to get through these phases, and that's why I'm focusing a little bit more on the community now, because I do feel like, because of my story, that I can support you guys better as well. And I think a lot of people resonate with the fact that I've been through this. I know, I've had this as well, and even though functional medicine can support so many different types of chronic dysfunction, I'm choosing this one because it's part of my story. And it's not even why I got into nutrition. Nutrition came to me because I lost a friend to breast cancer. And I just know that there's so much that my friend must have been dealing with, at the time. And I just didn't understand it. So, and that's why I wanted to study nutrition, just to understand the process of how dysfunction happens in the body. And, the more I learn about it, the more fascinated I become. And it's just a never ending, black hole of knowledge that you just want to dive into. And so I'll never know it all. And I don't believe we should. It's just what keeps us going and keeps us alive. So I hope that, by you guys resolving your chronic urticaria, that you'll be able to start pursuing the things that you really enjoy and really bring joy to you in your lives. So that's why I'm here. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for showing up. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.